Okay, now we're on to the second part of our discussion of friction. So as engineers, we can notice that we have friction, but as engineers, we want to be able to measure it, right? We want to be able to do math with this information. So we have developed something that's called the coefficient of friction, which tells us how much friction there is between these two surfaces, right? It gives us a number that we can generate, right? You can say there's a certain amount of friction if I just kind of rub my hands across like this. There's a different amount of friction if I do it with a pen or with something that's got a wheel in it or something like that. I don't have anything with a wheel in it. But if you have less friction, the coefficient of friction is less. If you have more friction, the coefficient of friction is more. So I'm going to have you watch a video here. And again, we're in PLTW section 4.2.2. Friction is a real drag. And we scroll down to under the activity that you did before, and we're under where it says measuring friction, and there's this video. So I'm going to try to play this video. I don't know if it'll work well. If it doesn't, pause my video, go to PLTW, and watch the video on your own. Okay, so hopefully that video was able to get through the play pause it. If not, if it's not working, then pause my video and play pause it and go to PLTW and watch it. So what you should do now is write down the formula for coefficient of friction. It was in that video. If you need to go back and watch it, make sure you do that. Write down that formula for coefficient of friction somewhere in your notebook. And understand it that the coefficient of friction is the ratio, right, between frictional forces and normal forces. So as a ratio, it doesn't have any units, right? So it's just the coefficient of friction. It's not listed as meters or seconds or kilograms or anything like that. It doesn't have any units, which is unusual for something that we use to calculate with. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to do a little experiment, and you're going to decide when something has more friction. And I want you to do this. You can do it in class, or you can do it at home, or wherever it is that you are doing this video. Let me show you my camera up here. Stop sharing so you can actually see me do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find two different surfaces. So I'm going to use the surface of my paper here, and I'm going to use the surface, the back surface, this plastic surface. All right, so they're different surfaces, right? The paper has one sort of surface. It's a little bit rougher than the plastic. And then I'm going to find one thing to move across those surfaces and decide which one has more friction. All right, and it seems like a simple experiment, but I want you to really observe it. All right, so first I'm going to take this roll of tape and I'm going to put it on the paper side, right? And I'm going to push along right here, and I'm going to feel what the force is like. How much force does it take me to start that moving? How much force does it take me to keep that moving, right? That has a certain coefficient of friction associated with it, right? Whenever I move that, there's a frictional force associated with that. That is based on the coefficient of friction between this tape and the paper. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to do that same experiment here. I'm going to take that same roll of tape and this different surface. I'm going to push it, and I'm going to feel how much force it takes to do that. Right now, I can feel that that takes less force to move that across. So that means that there is less friction, and that means that the coefficient of friction is less. Now, you're not going to be able to calculate coefficient of friction unless you can calculate the forces, unless I give you some tools to calculate the forces with, which we may do in class at some point. But for now, in the PlayPosit, I want you to describe what you just did. Describe your experiment and tell me which of those things produced a lesser coefficient of friction and which one produced a greater coefficient of friction. And I'm going to look for that in the PlayPosit.